When I think of tactical shooters that were on PS2, there are a couple that immediately pop into my head. The first is my favorite, Ghost Recon Jungle Storm, which was not only a really solid first-person tactical shooter in my opinion, but I also have some very fond memories of playing tons of split screen in it with my dad, so definitely some nostalgia there. The second were the SOCOM games, which blew me away with their realism and squad-based gameplay that really made kid me feel, well, like a badass Navy SEAL. But there's another title from this early 2000s era that I almost didn't get to experience. If it hadn't been for a friend who thought it would be hilarious to let me spend the first half of a co-op mission locked in a jail cell, I almost certainly would have never tried Conflict Desert Storm.
Don't shoot! They're right behind us! Straight ahead!
Released in 2002 for the PlayStation 2, GameCube, Xbox, and PC, Conflict Desert Storm arrived on store shelves at a time when war in the Middle East was a topic on everyone's mind, since the post-9/11 War on Terror was in full swing at this point. And although development for the game started prior to the war, it's hard to rule out that there wasn't at least some capitalization on it with the game's marketing. I guess there is a chance that the game releasing just after the 1-year anniversary of 9/11 is a coincidence, but I don't know. Regardless, there was definitely a much heightened interest in war games set in the Middle East at the time, regardless of when they took place, and I'm all but sure this title benefited from that. But enough talk, let's move on to the game. The story takes place, if you couldn't guess by the title, during the events of Operation Desert Storm, and starts in August of 1990, right as the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait is beginning. At the very start of the story, you get to choose between two elite Special Forces squads to play as, the American Delta Force or the British SAS. Before my boots touched any sand though, I needed to go through the tutorial first, and boy am I glad I did. Not because I needed to learn the game's mechanics, but because I got to fully immerse myself in the experience of getting screamed at to perform basic tasks.
My name is Master Sergeant Franks, and you will follow all orders I give you! Do you understand? Sir, yes, sir! Master! Come on, soldier! Get across those beams, soldier!
A mode is useful for aiming at a specific enemy! Now move the crosshair over one of the targets! Go ahead, soldier! Shoot both targets now!
Stellar drill sergeant voice acting aside, the tutorial does actually do a good job of teaching you the mechanics of the game. From the basics, like movement and gunnery, to more advanced things like laser designating targets and command. Most importantly though, the tutorial introduces you to the squad you're going to be fighting with. Bradley, Foley, Connors, and Jones. Each has their own specialty, causing gameplay to vary a bit depending on who you're playing as, but we'll go into more detail on that in a bit. The story starts off by sending you on a solo rescue mission. Foley, the team's sniper, gets captured while trying to infiltrate and destroy a bridge, a vital task that's necessary in order to slow down the advancing Iraqi forces. Your job here is simple. Infiltrate the area, find and rescue Foley, blow the bridge, and get out of there. And yes, this is that infamous mission where, if you are playing co-op, you'll be forced to sit in a jail cell twiddling your thumbs until your buddy arrives to rescue you. But it also serves as an introduction to the sort of level design and layout you're going to see throughout a large chunk of the campaign. Large, not open, but not entirely linear level designs that allow you to approach your mission objectives as you see fit. Want to try to use stealth and avoid enemies when possible, or just go in guns hot? The choice is yours, although things always seem to devolve into the latter from my experience. This level also introduces you to some things you'll see repeat themselves throughout your journey. The big one being vehicles, which, yeah, tanks in this game will absolutely wreck your shit. The sound of a tank moving nearby is absolutely terrifying. But also, you'll run into items that you can pick up and equip too, which will be vital as you move into the game's later stages, since things like ammo and healing items are often in short supply. Despite our enemy's best efforts, we're able to locate and rescue Foley, and after blowing the bridge, we extract for a mission success. Bradley even earned himself a promotion for his efforts. Mission 2 sees us hitting the streets of Kuwait City, where we're tasked with both rendezvousing with our third squad member, the heavy weapons specialist Connors, and rescuing the Emir of Kuwait.
Listen, I just had a run-in with a T-62 up on that overpass ahead, and the whole area's crawling with infantry. The bad news is, we have to go that way to get to the LZ. Get down! Get down!
Dealing with enemy armor was definitely the most challenging part of this one. Our next deployment finally sees the entire squad back together, with our fourth member, the demolitions expert named Jones, finally joining the party. And his expertise is definitely needed, because this is the first of many levels that sees you on what I like to call Scud Patrol. There's a number of missions throughout the campaign that see you hunting Scud launchers, SAM sites, and all sorts of bits and pieces of Iraqi infrastructure that require your expertise. You'll also run into missions that are sort of like the game on hard mode, because you don't get to resupply when you complete them. So when you start the following mission, you start with whatever supplies you ended the previous one with. These, along with any of the ones where you have to escort defenseless NPCs, were by far the hardest levels. And there's actually one later on in the game that combines both of these mechanics. It involves you having to escort a scientist through a city in one level in order to, in the next, locate and disarm an Iraqi nuclear warhead. Not only do you have to keep this asshole alive, he also replaces one of the members of your team, so you have to go through both of these while being short a man. I honestly thought I'd soft-locked myself at this point because I completed the previous level with essentially no medkits. I had to really buckle down and play extremely carefully, utilizing Foley in the sniper role to make it to the point where I could find some medkits to both heal up the squad and have some in reserve for later.
Target down!
Oh, I also had a nuke detonate in my face at least 2 times before finally completing this level, so yeah, that was fun. But overall, the Journey Through Conflict Desert Storms campaign is a fun one. There's good variation in levels with a solid mix of both urban and desert combat, and there's even a couple missions where you get deployed in vehicles too, which were an absolute blast. The finale, where you have to gun down the Iraqi Supreme Commander, General Aziz, who is totally not meant to be Saddam Hussein, by the way, as he's leaving his bunker, is the icing on the cake and a satisfying conclusion to the game's story. Before we move on to gameplay, I've got to take a quick break to talk about our continuing partnership with Apex Gaming PCs. With custom-built PCs available in different configurations at various price points, they're sure to have an option for any gamer out there, especially when you factor in their affordable and flexible financing options. Whether you're on a budget and opting for the entry-grade Apex Bronze, or looking to dominate your competition with the Streamer Plus, you can rest easy knowing that your investment is protected by the Apex standard 2-year parts and lifetime labor warranty. There's never been a better time to buy since there's currently a massive 10% site-wide sale that can be combined with my 3% discount code JARBO. See link in the video description below. Alright, back to the video. Alright, let's move on to gameplay. How does revisiting this game, oh so many years later, actually feel? Well, if I set my nostalgia goggles aside, I can definitely tell you that the game isn't perfect. While there are a lot of things that the game does do right, like the easy to navigate inventory system, which allows you to quickly swap or share equipment, and the intuitive command system, there are a couple things that hold it back from being an objectively great tactical shooter. The first is the gunplay. The game has a sort of auto-aim system going on, which is a bit similar to what you see in the SOCOM games, but the implementation here is nowhere near as good. In those games, I could reliably use the auto-aim to engage and hit enemies. And it's not just fond memories either, because I revisited it while making this video, and it felt so much better than the system in Conflict Desert Storm. The system just doesn't work that well. I don't know what else to say. It seems to have a tendency to stick to lower on enemies instead of targeting center of mass, and just doesn't seem very accurate overall. When you combine this with the odd auto-centering camera feature that makes it so that whenever you move your camera in the vertical axis, it recenters back to the center of the screen when you take your finger off the analog stick, it creates something that can feel very awkward at times. Thankfully, the game does allow you to enter a first-person aiming mode with the click of R3, which is what I ended up using almost exclusively, but I feel the experience could have really been elevated if the auto-aim system had been just a bit more fine-tuned. The next big problem is enemy AI, specifically their movement. Once you learn how the AI moves, it's very easy to exploit them. There were many times I could just set my squad facing a doorway or choke point, and the enemy would just happily walk around the corner into their line of fire. And they would do this repeatedly until they were all dead. Even in situations where there could be valid flanking routes for them to take, like on an open map for instance, they tend to just attack you from one direction. And by the time my run was finished, this had become very apparent. I could just set my squad mates to look in the direction the enemy was coming from and sit and wait for them to come to us. Now, despite this, the enemy AI is effective at engaging you. If you run out into the open and they're looking in your direction, or if they have a moment to get set up to play shots on you, they can definitely take you out really quickly. This is not a run and gun type game. Maybe you can get away with playing like that sometimes, but almost every time I tried to do it, it ended very poorly. You definitely benefit from taking a slower, more thought out approach to how you advance, sticking to cover and limiting line of sight when possible.
Watch the doors and corners where they get you.
So earlier we mentioned the squad. Bradley, Foley, Connors, and Jones. Despite the game's story not really giving much development, like at all, to these characters, as I played, I definitely grew to have a fondness for them. Bradley, the team lead, is who I played with the most, who's sort of a jack of all trades, sporting an M16 that's flexible enough to be used at basically all ranges. Foley's the team sniper, and looking back on my playthrough, he might actually be the GOAT. I started to use him more and more as the game progressed because his sniper rifle allows you to one-shot any enemy, and at extreme ranges too. He's definitely a really solid team member who in the right hands can be absolutely devastating. Connors was probably my least favorite, nothing personal, but I was just not a really big fan of the implementation of LMGs in this game. Basically, if you're not crouched or prone, there's this sort of weird delay where it takes a moment to be able to begin firing, which I just wasn't a fan of. When stationary though, he definitely can be a beast. Lastly, there's Jones, the demolition specialist and also the sort of pseudo-stealth or close range specialist. He's the only squad member who can carry two primary weapons, a shotgun for close quarters and a silenced MP5. Next to Connors, he was my next least utilized, but I still did use him when the situation called for it. If the auto-aim mechanic had been just a bit better, I think he would have been an absolute monster in close quarters with the shotgun, but even so, the MP5 was a solid weapon to use despite having a bit of a shorter range compared to some of the other offerings. Alright, before we conclude, let's talk presentation. Visually, the game definitely shows its age. I chose to play through the game at native resolution in order to get a bit more of an authentic feel of it, but even upscaled, it doesn't look particularly great. I'm sure back in the day on a CRT, it looked fine, probably even good, but I've certainly played other PS2 titles that hold up better graphically. Audio-wise, the game is pretty solid, but nothing really stood out to me as impressive during my playthrough, at least sound effects-wise. Music-wise though, there were a couple tracks that stood out, specifically the main menu music and the mission success music. Have a listen. So, does Conflict Desert Storm hold up in 2025? Well, it depends on how you look at it. I don't think the game has aged particularly well. Combat definitely feels clunky compared to modern titles, but if you can get past that and just want to relive the glory days of early 2000s, staying up until 4 AM sleepovers, I think it could be worth it. but the best experience to be had in the game is definitely still via split-screen co-op. Let me know your thoughts on the game down below, and as always, thanks for watching. Until next time.